Welcome to Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham, and this is my good buddy Ty Franck.
We're doing our first ever solo Ty and That Guy episode. It's pretty exciting.
Super exciting. And I just want to explain if it gets a little confusing because Ty and I had this idea to do this podcast where we connect it to the Expanse, but we also talk about other things that Expanse fans would find interesting. It mimics our long conversations that we have about genre and in genre culture and everything related to genre. So we had the idea, we brought it to Amazon, and Amazon said, why don't we turn this into an after show for season 5? So the first thing we did is the after show with season 5 with guests that are connected to each episode that we highlighted. And we did a little bit of diving into other things that inspired certain people that are working on the Expanse, the actors. And so this is an actual continuation of that. This is our first podcast where we're going to go through and do a deep dive on every episode of The Expanse, but also talk about the influences that created The Expanse, but also made us want to get into storytelling and things that we just love in general. And for instance, today is about season 1, episode 1 of The Expanse. And also we're going to talk a lot about Alien because Ty and I happen to be super uber fans of the movie Alien, and it inspired us to get in storytelling and do what we do. And it was a direct influence on Ty for creating The Expanse.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be overstated how much Alien influenced the original idea for The Expanse. I mean, it's I saw it when I was a kid. I was pretty young when I watched it. I remember the first time I saw it, it was my friend and I went to stay the night at my friend's house because his parents had a basement and a TV down in the basement. So we could sneak down there at like 3:00 in the morning and watch like late night HBO. And usually you were down there, you were looking for some boobies, right? You were looking for a show where somebody was going to take their clothes off. And that's what you did. We snuck down, at like 2:00 in the morning. We turned on HBO and Alien was just starting, those opening credits, those amazing with the lines slowly appearing and writing the word alien. And my parents had seen the movie Alien, and I remember them talking about it. They saw it with a friend of theirs, and then they came back, and the three of them were talking about it. And I was just entranced. Like I wanted to hear everything, but of course, it was scary. It was R-rated. They were like, no, you got to go to bed, and I didn't get to hear the whole thing. So as soon as I saw those letters come up, I was like, all right, I'm in. We're gonna stay up till 5 a.m. We're gonna watch this movie, and even as excited as I was, even as pumped as I was to watch this movie, I was not ready. I was not ready. That movie hit me in the face, grabbed my head, and I probably didn't move at all for 2.5 hours. It just locked me in. And ever since then, like everything I think sci-fi is in my brain, I think it all started there. Like that was the seed, and everything has grown from that.
That's funny. You mentioned staying up late nights to see some movies. And did you ever watch the scramble channels? The channels
that didn't start until I was a lot older. Because
okay. So on our TV, all the naughty channels were scrambled. They had a scrambler on them. But if you watch long enough, and your patience might be paid off with just a little still frame.
Got there for a second.
Yeah, just for like one still frame of the scramble of a movie. And I mean, I had a friend that spent a lot of time staring at the scramble channels.
Yeah, your friend. Yeah, I knew that guy.
Yeah, friend. Yeah, I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah.
I had a very similar experience. And I don't know if we've ever talked about the first time we saw Alien, but I had a very similar experience. I was staying at my buddy's house, Ashley Hancock, and he also had he converted the whole basement to his bedroom. And what was great about going to Ashley's house is his dad owned video stores, and his dad, all the old videos or whatever that didn't meet the videotape standards, that you could still watch them, but the things they threw out, he got them all. So he had just cabinets full of movies and movies. And I remember seeing the green egg and the alien letters on the box. And so, and he was a big fan of Alien, and he was telling me about it. And I remember, when I was a kid, always being kind of hearing about it, whatever. But I never really saw it. And we sat down and watched that movie, and it was the same thing for you. What really pulled me in was the atmosphere, like the way it looked, the working class vibe, and up until that point, and we'll get in this, we'll talk about a little bit of this more, but doing the research or kind of going back and watching Alien and reading about Alien, I really am learning about how many things came before that were influential to Alien, because for me, Alien was it. That was ground zero. And I
Yeah.
know that, there's, tons of stuff before that, but that's when I saw that, it was the first time I saw working class, realistic people in space complaining about bonuses and certain things like that. And one of the things that I love about Ridley Scott, and like what I felt in Blade Runner, is he creates the atmosphere in the world that just really that just pulls me in, and I could spend forever there. Like, I just really, really enjoy his stuff.
He's yeah, I mean, he famously is incredibly detailed. Um and to the point where it almost feels a little crazy, because it's things no one will ever see. But for him, in order for the world to feel real for his camera and for the actors that are in it, he needs all the details to be right. I remember reading a book about the making of Blade Runner. And one of the things they talked about there is when Deckard is chasing Zora through the street to shoot her, they run past a magazine stand, and they took a freeze frame of that magazine stand and they zoomed in, and they showed that every magazine on that magazine stand is a magazine that is current to the world of Blade Runner for the month that is happening in, with headlines like, new model androids. Do they have, is the new synth skin better to touch? Like, I mean, the like actual headlines like you would have on a magazine in the Blade Runner world at that moment. And so they created dozens, probably like 40 or 50 fake magazines that are magazines that exist in the Blade Runner world. And you never see it. Like, no one watching that movie has ever seen that. Deckard just runs past it. It's a blur in the background, but it doesn't matter for Ridley Scott. That's an important detail.
And it shows,
Yeah.
but so going back and watching episode 1, season 1 of The Expanse, I can tell, I really can see how influenced you were with Alien. And I think even the opening credits, when I see that, the year, blah, 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 and this is what's happening, and this is the story, I'm in. And that music and that tone, and then you go, and then there's this working class vibe, and then you see a whole nother culture series in the belt, and you meet Thomas Jane, you meet Joe Miller. Talk a little bit about that, in terms of how it influenced you and how it directly relates to The Expanse. And I don't want to jump ahead too much, but for instance, they answer a distress call, that kind of pulls them into the adventure.
Yeah, I mean, the parallels are pretty obvious. I mean, Daniel Abraham, my writing partner, and I, when we're working on the books, we're pretty upfront about what we're influenced by, what we're borrowing from, and I'm of the opinion that every creator borrows from the things that have come before. It's anybody who claims that they don't, liar. But things like answering distress calls. But I mean, let's go through the episode. I mean, we open with that text crawl. And I will freely admit I was very opposed to that. I generally don't like the opening text crawls for things.
What?
I don't. I don't. I want to just get right into it. But
Conan, you didn't like that? You didn't like Terminator? You didn't like
Conan doesn't have an opening text crawl. Conan opens with Conan's father talking about when Crom gave the riddle of steel to men. There's no crawl.
You know what? You're right. There is no scroll. But here's the thing. I had a poster of Conan.
Right.
And on the poster, there was red letters that
Right.
kind of that would be what the scroll would be. So you have Conan, then you have the poster coming down. So I always, in my mind, always kind of always picture the opening with the letters or whatever. But okay.
But it wasn't there. It was just his father talking to him.
Yeah.
about the gods and about the riddle of steel and all those things.
What about Terminator?
So my feeling is that those text crawls are always driven by the studio. I don't think any director says, you know what I'd love to open with? I'd love to open with some text crawling up the screen.
Well,
With the
I
ex-
guess
with the
I
exception of George Lucas, I'm
mhm.
certain that George Lucas absolutely intended there to be a text crawl at the beginning of Star Wars. I think that was a very deliberate directorial choice. But
Right.
most of the time, like in Blade Runner, Ridley Scott didn't want to start with a text crawl explaining what replicants were. That was a studio thing. The studio saying everybody will be confused, nobody will understand, so you
I
have to have this text crawl.
I knew the voiceover was, but I didn't know that the scrawl was.
I would bet $1,000 it was. I would bet
Because I
$1,000
guess
that
I'm just a I'm a sucker for it. Like, if I see the year was 2020 and this famine and pandemic, whatever, I'm in. I'm like, I am that sets the story up for me. I loved it when I saw it at The Expanse.
yeah.
Um, so I guess this is, something we disagree on.
No, well, what I was gonna say is like I pretty vocally didn't want it to be there. At
Uh-huh.
the same time, though, I understand the utility of it.
Yeah.
I understand why it's why studios think that they're important, why they think, we need to ground the audience. Studios expect most people to be like you, and they expect that by giving those details up front, you set the person in the scene faster. And I'm not going to say they're wrong. I mean, obviously it works for you. But specifically Alien now, Alien starts with nothing.
Mhm.
Alien doesn't start with a text crawl. It's the future and people are mining in space and there's a spaceship. Like they don't say anything. They just show you space.
Mhm.
And then they show you the ship. And then we're inside the ship. And for I don't know how many minutes it actually is, but it feels like 5 or 10 minutes. The camera's just moving through the ship.
It absolutely does. I wonder how long that is because I was surprised, going back and watching this, I was surprised at how long that opening was.
Yeah. It's very long.
Yeah,
And and it's very silent.
yeah.
There's sort of a ship noise, like you assume it's like the engines of the ship or something that's kind of a rumble. But
Mhm,
other than that, there's almost no noise. And then we end up with those screens. And when the screens come on and the text starts going across, that it seems so loud. And the reason it seems so loud is because everything has been so quiet before that. So that text coming on is a startling moment. It
mhm,
startles you. It's like a jump scare without any jump scare in
mhm,
that moment when it happens.
mhm, and it starts
And
lighting up a little bit, so it kinda creates a mystery, like, what is
the
this
ship
thing
starts
that's
turning
happening?
on, and you see the lights coming on, and uh, it's such a brilliant, powerful opening.
Mhm.
What we were trying to do with the opening of The Expanse, obviously we couldn't do that. You can get away with things in a feature film you cannot get away with on TV. I guarantee you, no studio in the world is going to. You walk and you go, okay, the opening of my pilot TV show is 10 minutes of nothing. Like no studio in the world is going to be
Yeah.
like, yeah, that sounds great. We should do that. Um, but in our way, in the TV version, we were trying to get some of that where we start out, we're outside Ceres, the asteroid. We see it from a distance. We hear somebody talking, we hear like the belter rabble rouser talking about the disagreements between the inner planets, the belters and the inners. And as we hear him talking about that, we're sort of going past ships, and then we become part of one of those tugs for a moment, and as it flies into the station, and then now we're in the station, and then we fly through the wall, and now we're inside, and we see the various levels of the station as we're flying up through, hearing this guy talk. I mean, it's deliberately one of those moments. It's like that opening of Alien, where it's like, here's where the story's about to take place.
Mm.
Because the thing the opening of Alien does is it tells you what the ship is, and the rest of the story takes place in those sets.
And what I really thought was masterfully done about Alien was you get to know who everybody is, what they do, what their jobs are just by their behavior. Nobody you weren't told anything. It was patient. You just saw, their interactions, whatever, and then you're like, oh, I guess Ripley's an officer, and then you kind of figure out people's jobs. You kind of figure out, and then you see Parker complaining about this and that, and then you say, okay, well, this is where they are on the on the hierarchy, and then, kind of going through and the class structure, and I felt, so that's one of the things I love is like you let the characters do what they do, and that informs you of who they are instead of telling them who they are. And then
Right.
it's just like in life, when you get to know people, you're watching them, you're kind of fascinated in the dynamic.
Yeah, and that first episode is doing that with Miller. It shows him being violent toward a perp. It shows him being rejected by the other Belters as they call it a Wellwalla, as a traitor. They show him with his Earther partner, kind of almost contemptuous of his Earther partner. So we show him that Miller's a man without a country, because to the Belters, he's an Earther sympathizer, but to the Earthers, he has nothing but contempt for the Earthers. So he's disconnected from everything. So you show that. You also show that, he's corrupt. He takes a bribe from somebody on the train. We see him do it. We see that he's cynical about the role of police in their world. The line, series doesn't have laws, it has cops.
Cops.
The cynicism about what they're doing is very apparent. Like there's a lot of sort of setting the ground for what Miller is that we have to do very quickly, and what the world is. Yeah.
Why does Miller dress like an Earther? What is his thing with Earther clothes?
Yeah. So primarily the hat. So the idea there is that very often marginalized people will dress like the people who marginalize them. You look at like one of the most striking images you see when you see like really, really poor war-torn countries in Africa is everybody's got like a basketball jersey on, or like a movie t-shirt, with like some American movie or something. It's really common for that kind of stuff. It's this, I'm poor, I have nothing, but I can kind of, in a way, pretend like I'm a member of this other group that is the sort of the ideal of like what being rich is, or what being powerful is, or what being in the upper class is. And it's almost subconscious.
Yeah. And so Earth is the dominant culture.
Yeah. Earth is the dominant culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so by putting on that Earther style hat, and you got to remember, as we learned later in the first season, that wasn't his hat. That was his friend Sematimba's hat.
Mm-hmm.
And Sematimba gave it to him when they were children. So Sematimba was wearing that hat when he was probably like, 10, 11, 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about what a 12-year-old connects to as picture a 12-year-old who is basically an orphan running around in Sirius Station, stealing to survive. What symbols might that orphan connect to say, I'm important, I'm not just street trash, I'm better than this?
Mm-hmm.
A symbol that he has seen in Earther wear, something he's seen in Earther wear before. Because I'm going to put that on, and then in a way I'm an Earther too, and I'm important, and I'm rich, and I'm powerful. 12-year-olds have that version of magical thinking, that by putting the hat on, somehow I will become that thing.
What's fascinating is if you cut through to season 5, when we first meet Jacob, he's surrounded by all these things, and we know where he came from. We know he comes from the streets. He had nothing, and now that he has something, he has motorcycles in his office, and he can't ride them.
Yes.
And and so it's that same psychology of surrounding you with these things that are going to give you importance, that give you identity, to make you feel that you have value.
It's that magical thinking of, if I put on the clothes of the people that are better than me, or that I think they're not better than me, but I think that they are. I think they're rich. I think they're powerful. I want to be them. If I put on their clothes, in some way, that power transfers to me. I get some piece of it, get some taste of it. It's very magical thinking, but it is exactly the kind of magical thinking that a destitute 12-year-old orphan might engage with. So yeah, I mean, there's that. It's funny because people always say like, what's up with the hat? But the hat has an incredible backstory to it. That
It does, yeah.
it comes from these poor street kids, and then when Sematimba left the station, in disgrace, it was his way of sort of passing the mantle of his dreams onto his best friend. You know, the hat represented some of Timma's dreams for what he could be, but when he left in disgrace, he gave it to his best friend, saying, here, I'm giving, in a sense, I'm giving you my dreams about the future and what we could have been. It's, you know, I mean, it's very subtle stuff. We never spell it out, but it's all in there. All of that backstory is in there. But having said that, I mean, that's another connection point to what, you know, we're talking about Alien is, you know, you referenced Parker and Brett, the two guys who are complaining that they don't get as much money as the other characters on the show. And that idea of space as a place filled with blue collar workers was so powerful to me when I saw Alien. That, you know, I mean, obviously I'd seen original Star Trek. I loved original Star Trek, you know, Kirk and Spock and Bones. Those were my jam when I was a kid. Like I watched every episode probably 100 times because, you know, the reruns would show every day. But they were military officers. You know, Kirk was a captain. He was important. Bones was a doctor. You know, Spock was a Vulcan. He was an educated man. He was a scientist. And they were all officers in this Starfleet. And, you know, they interacted with admirals and, you know, high political officers on other planets. And I thought that's what sci-fi was. I thought sci-fi was those big sort of ideas. And then you watch Alien, and Parker and Brett are truck drivers. Parker and Brett are merchant marines who wander around a leaking ship with pipe wrenches on their tool belts, tightening fittings, fixing burned out motors, and bitching that they don't get paid as much as the officers do. And that was revelatory for me. I was like, oh my God, that is what sci-fi can be. It can be exactly that.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because, again, that's the first time I remember seeing that. I know now that it's exists before, but to see that space travel that is so lived in and so worn that it's not even a thing anymore, and the way that they communicated with each other, there was something so comforting about that working class vibe. And you know, I actually, doing the research for this, I actually heard about Dark Star, and I never saw Dark Star, and I went back and I watched a little bit of Dark Star, and there is that kind of same vibe where they're on the ship and they're kind of just going through the motions and doing their thing. But you know, reading the Expanse and reading the when I first got the pilot as well, like going through and reading about the Canterbury, I immediately recognized right off. It's like, oh, this is that same vibe, that same thing that I love so much with Aliens, and I loved it so much that it's so disappointing that the people that we end up meeting and falling in love with or whatever, they ended up, you know, getting blown up.
Yeah. I mean, the Canterbury is absolutely a callback to the Nostromo. That you know, and if you know, we're getting away from series now and going on to sort of the introduction of our space crew with Holden and Amos and Naomi and Alex, you know, and those early episodes, Shed, you know, getting to meet those people. It's the same kind of thing. We follow Holden and Naomi and Amos through a long corridor of the ship and into a lift. And they're talking about things that need to be fixed on the ship. Naomi's complaining because she doesn't have the budget she needs to fix the things that need to be fixed. And she's saying, you need to talk to corporate. You need to talk to the bosses. You need to tell them we need more money to fix this stuff. And as she's saying it, shit in the lift is breaking. And she's like banging on it, right?
Right.
And then, you know, they come out and they go down another long corridor and they go out into sort of the I guess the bridge of the ship. But it's not a Star Trek bridge. It's not ultra clean, brightly lit, you know, with like chairs arrayed for, you know, for everybody to see. It's consoles jammed into a space that's too small for them. It feels like we had this little room. We had to put a lot of desks in it, and we just sort of jammed desks wherever they would fit, and that's where people work. And you know, people are complaining in there. You've got Ade is complaining about stuff. You've got Becca complaining about stuff. You know, the captain calls Holden in and tries to give him a promotion, and Holden's too lazy. He's like, yeah, I don't want a fucking promotion. I like my job. I don't have to do shit. Right. It's exactly that sort of vibe to everything. And
And also it's the relaxed protocol, you got Alex sliding down the stair, he's got earphones on, like, that can't be, regulation, like, people, they've been out of space and kinda away from it for so long, they're rolling down their uniforms, they're,
yeah,
got stains on their outfits and
trust me, nobody there is in the military. These
right, right.
these these are truck drivers. These are merchant marines, and not to make you uncomfortable, but I mean, Amos is the ultimate depiction of that. When we meet Amos, he's following Naomi around in the same way. Remember how Brett followed Parker everywhere?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
Amos following Naomi as if she's Parker, right?
yeah,
He's got a tool when we meet him. He's got a toolbox in his hand. He's got his like jumpsuit on for it's covered in grease stains. Um,
right.
Holden says, "Hey, you got a pry bar?" Of course, Amos has one. He just immediately whips it out of his toolbox.
It is too
You know,
funny, yeah.
like he just got it right. Like, oh yeah, of course I've got a pry bar. I might need to pry something later. You know, um, and it's funny because Amos's big concern in that scene is none of the stuff anybody else was talking about. His big concern is he better get that pry bar back because he's going
Yeah,
to need it later, right? Like
absolutely,
better get that back, right?
and
Um,
there's a connection and relationship that he has to his tools,
yeah,
value that he has in them and in his trade and what he does, and so he gives them that pry bar, but that's that, that shit better get back to him. That's an important thing.
and it's funny that you mentioned that because one of the things that we always do in props with any Amos prop is if it's something Amos cares about, he writes his name on it.
Right. Yeah.
All of his toolboxes have his name on them.
Right.
Like, and it's almost kind of a funny, big childish scrawl. But if you see a toolbox and it has the name Amos on it, you don't fucking touch those tools.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
leave that alone unless he says it's okay.
Yeah. It's like going into like an old, World War II vet's garage, like Clint Eastwood on Gran Torino, and
Yeah,
how
yeah,
much they prize their tools and what it means to them and how it gives them, how the relationship and connection they have to those things.
so
Yeah, absolutely.
if that's the job that you do, when you need a tool, you always know exactly where it is because you're the one that put it there, right? And you always put it in the same place. And if you reach for it and it's not there, that's kind of a big deal.
Mhm.
So it's that you sort of guard your space, you guard your workspace. It's
Mhm.
like everything in that box, my name's written on the box, everything in the box I put in there, I know exactly where I put it. I know exactly what it does and when I need it. And when I'm working, I don't want to have to think. I want to just flip the box open, reach to the spot that I know the thing is always at, grab it, and get my work done. Right? I don't want to be
Yeah.
digging through there. I don't want to be looking. Um, and that it is that blue collar vibe that if you've ever been like when I was young, one of my many terrible jobs, I worked in a sawmill in the Northwest.
Mhm.
You know, where you're working around, like moving conveyor belts and saws and big pieces of lumber going by. And that's how the guys there work. If I've got a tool that I need to use to make the saw work or the conveyor belt work or whatever, it better fucking be in the spot where I put it. And
Yeah.
every time I reach for it, it better be there. And you do not walk off with somebody's shit without making it very clear ahead of time that you need to
Yeah.
borrow and when you're going to bring it back.
Yeah.
So that really informs how I view
Yeah.
the way those guys work. Yeah.
That it's really interesting. I draw up a lot of upon that, in with this atmosphere and creative. I worked at an airport. It was an airplane mechanic hangar. It was called Airmech. It was owned by Rob Mancini, and I worked there when I was in high school.
Oh, did
And
you?
yeah, and I actually just drove by it not too long ago, which was really insane and nostalgia. But I love Rob. He was like a dad to me. But I started working there, and this is where I learned everything practical about
Yeah.
like how to use tools, how to change, like how to work on things. And he taught me how to weld, and he gave me a brand new welder's mask, and that meant a lot to me. He taught me how to fuel the planes and how to do all the work that we did, and that kind of labor and that kind of work bonds you to each other, and
Yeah,
it's
it does.
yeah, and so and there's a relationship that these people have uh, that is very lived in. But one thing I'm really curious about for you is I just enjoy the crew and the captain of the Canterbury so much.
Yeah.
What was your reasoning for creating them knowing their fate? What was going behind that? What uh
I mean, that is the reason.
mhm,
Um, the reason that a movie like Alien takes so long getting to the moment where the shit starts to hit the fan is by the time people start to die, we have to love those people. I have to really care when Brett gets killed in the water chain room. I have to want Ripley to survive. I have to want Dallas when Dallas is crawling through the air ducts and they're telling him the aliens coming on him. My heart has to be pounding. I have to really want Dallas to get away. And the only way you can do that is go ahead.
And just to add something to that, and then we'll come back to it. But one of the things that Alien does so well, because if you think about, when it came out in 1979, but when I watch it, when you see the Tom Skerritt character, when you see Dallas, you immediately are like, oh, he's gonna survive. He's the hero. He's
Hero.
and
Yep.
when he dies, I was like, what? And
And
then I'm waiting for him to come back. I'm waiting for, I'm like, wait, I've never seen the hero
Yep.
die and then everybody get picked off like that. And to me, because people talk about Game of Thrones and how they did it, whatever. The first time I saw it was with Alien, and that blew my mind. I'm so used to, as a kid, like, seeing movies that the captain, the guy was the hero, Tom Skerritt, he was going to make it all the way through, and he died, and that really threw me. And that goes back to the Canterbury. What you're talking about before I interrupted you is I connect to these people, and I'm like, oh, these are the people I'm going to be living with and having
Right.
adventures with.
Yeah, and the only way to do that is to kind of make you love them. So Joe Pingay, who played the captain, was perfect for that part because Holden meets with him. Joe's playing like this like lovable teddy bear of a captain. Like he knows what he wants. He's the boss, right? We see him lay his foot down a couple times. He's definitely the boss. But you get the feeling like you'd like to serve on a ship with that guy. He's funny. Like when he's talking about his cats, that's one of the funniest moments of the pilot.
Dude, I love that. And what is the connection from the cats, and what gave you that idea?
Well, we'll never say. It's one of those. No, honestly, the truth is, I think it was just one of those funny little moments that Mark and Hawk put in the pilot script.
Oh, okay.
Because you got to give people weird little quirks and stuff. I think Mark and Hawk just put that in the pilot script because they thought it was funny.
Right, right.
But it works because Joe lands it so well. Like he's
Right.
when he does his little under the breath, "Those are mine." It's one of the funniest moments on the show, and because of that, we love him. Right?
Right.
We love Joe. Becca,
That's so true. As soon as I saw that and I laugh out loud, I'm like, I like that guy.
that guy,
It's
yeah.
something quirky and,
And the rivalry between Becca and Ade, where they kind of sniping back and forth. We're like, oh, that's gonna be a thing. The show will every episode will have a moment where Becca and Ade are sniping at each other. It feels like you're laying the groundwork for a crew for a long running show. Everybody feels very realized. Everybody feels very real, right? And because of that, it's the Tom Skerritt thing. It's there's no way that all of those people that I just spent 20 minutes learning to love just died. But because we spent the time to do that, and because we did give them more than just paper thin characterization, when that ship blows up, it's supposed to be a shocking moment. It's supposed to feel like, wait, this show is not what I thought it was. Something else is happening here. Something way bigger is happening here.
and it's heartbreaking, and what also I love is that what ends up becoming the Rossi crew, the way that this crew is introduced, they're not highlighted in any special way. There's not anything to say, okay, these are going to be the heroes that you're going to follow. They're
Right.
just a part of the crew. They're number one, and it could have randomly been any other handful of people at Canterbury that went to answer that distress call. And
Yeah.
that's
And
what really
and we have people arguing that they don't want to get on the ship, right? When they talk about the mission, you've got people on the bridge. They're going, "No way, I'm going."
right, right. Kind of like when they go down to the planet to answer the distress call. There's people that like, I'm not going down there to do that.
Parker and Brett are arguing that if they have to go down to the planet, they should get paid overtime.
Yeah.
You're like, well, are we getting paid to do that? Because if I'm not getting paid to go down to that planet, I'm not going down there.
And then they tell them about the distress clause and what's in there, and if they don't answer, they don't get paid for anything. And I love that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all of that stuff. All of that goes into building a shocking moment. if you start out and like if we one of the things we, you know, when we were first developing the season, the pilot script had been written, but the pilot script was much longer. It took in much more of the first book than the pilot script we actually shot. And one of the things we talked about was in that version of the pilot, the Canterbury is destroyed in like the first 10 minutes of the pilot. So it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Right. You're in such a rush to get to that moment and past it that this thing, and by the way, the destruction of the Canterbury is supposed to haunt Holden for the entire first season. It's supposed to haunt him. If we're rushing past it and we don't ever get any connection to the people on the ship and we just blow it up in the first 10 minutes, that won't land. It won't make any sense. We won't understand why Holden is so devastated by that. Yeah. So, I mean, all of that goes into developing the story.
Yeah.
And it's riffing on Alien taking 40 minutes before anybody dies.
You know, it's really interesting to me to go back and research Alien and see how it became what it became, and to all of the things that could have happened where this movie didn't get made, or a less version of that movie.
Yeah.
And I think if you got to look at who, you know, who's the hero in a lot of ways, I mean, Ridley Scott is what elevates Alien to a whole nother level, a whole nother, in his attention to detail and his art and the way that, because, and what I thought was fascinating too is that he was not a sci-fi fan growing up. It did not interest him. He thought it was direct quote was he thought it was highly disapproved of, vaguely aligned with sex movies. And it wasn't until he went and saw 2001 that it really kind of shook him and was like, "Oh, this can be beautiful. This can be art, and this could be an expression of how to deal with certain things that we're having in our present moment, in our present time." And then the 1-2 punch, he just did The Duelist. He was in LA. He was meeting with producers, talking about his next thing, and he met with Fox, and they're like, "Hey, we should go see this Star Wars movie." And he went to a matinee, went and saw it, and it changed his life. It was those things that we talk about that completely changed his life. And it's, you know, and the reality is the, you know, that Star Wars and that viewing is why we have Alien, why we have Blade Runner, why we have those things that he made that are masterpieces. But the way that this script came to him, I mean, Walter Hill almost directed this movie, and I wonder what that movie would have been like. I think Walter Hill was the first person to elevate it, because he took the script, and it was really the chest bursting scene that really got his attention. But he saw that there were any. What is the movie that you referenced earlier that Walter Hill said that the Expanse was ripped, that Alien was ripped off of?
Yeah, it is. Hold on just a second. It is The Thing from Another World.
The Thing from Another World. Did you see that movie?
I have seen that movie, and in fact, there are elements of Thing from Another World that are also direct influences on The Expanse in a very real, concrete way. So not only did Alien greatly influence The Expanse, but years later, I saw the movie that sort of was the influence for Alien, and it also directly influenced The Expanse. So Thing from Another World is a spaceship full of astronauts lands on an alien planet. A monster gets on board the ship. They leave the planet, but the monster has gotten on board, and it's down in the engine room of the ship, and it begins murdering people on the ship. And the whole rest of the movie is the crew trying to find a way to beat this monster before it kills everyone on the ship. So, I mean, it's pretty directly related to Alien. It's very different in tone. It's incredibly different in tone. It feels like military. It feels like astronauts. It doesn't feel like it does not have the blue collar feel. It's if you watch the two movies, they're going to feel very different to you. But the thing where it directly influenced The Expanse, I think, is the ship is built like a tower. So it's shaped like a rocket, but it's not a rocket where the whole bottom 90% is just fuel tanks. It's shaped like a rocket where there's decks. And the monster gets in the bottom where the engine is. And as it begins to murder its way through the ship, it keeps moving up. And the astronauts keep having to move up to higher and higher decks and sealing the deck below until finally they wind up in the very top of the ship, which is, I guess, the bridge. and there's nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to run to. And I remember watching that as I was older than when I saw Alien, but still kind of a kid, watching that and thinking, why aren't all ships designed that way? That just makes sense. That
Mhm.
ship is like a tower.
Mhm.
And of course, by the time, I guess 20 years later or so, when I was working on the Expanse, I mean, that just made sense to me. Of course, the ships are designed like towers like that. And that's pretty directly from that movie.
That's interesting. So Walter Hill said that the two things that really made him, well, number one, he recognized the movie that you just mentioned and is one of his favorites. Number two, he said the script was not very good. He did not connect to it, but
I read the original script.
but there were two things that really connected him, that he thought was really interesting. Number one is the fact that they got around to why they didn't kill the alien, because they made the blood acid and that it would harm them if they killed the alien. Number two, the chest bursting scene.
Yeah.
And he said, but the characterizations were paper thin. There wasn't any differentiate, So what did you think about the original script when you read it?
No, that's absolutely. And I'm not here to bash on Dan O'Bannon. Dan O'Bannon's been around a long time, or was in Hollywood a long time, did a bunch of stuff. I'm not here to bash him.
And as we all know, beginning ideas and scripts and everything, it takes a while to get developed into it. So, anybody, when their first drafts or early drafts of scripts, they're still finding it. So this is not absolutely. I agree with you.
I want to make sure I'm saying I'm not here to bash Dan O'Bannon.
Yeah, and neither am I.
The earliest draft of that
Fuck,
script
fuck
was
O'Banion. Just kidding. Go ahead.
it was exactly what Walter Hill said it was. It was paper thin. The characters' names were like Ace and Hunter. It definitely felt like they were it felt like they were in the military. They talked to each other like they were in the military, but supposedly they were on this mining ship. It was absolutely a paper thin rewrite of Thing from Another World. That's what it was. And I think what Walter Hill brought to it is exactly what you're talking. I think he brought that grittiness. I think he brought that blue collar feel to it. That's his influence on the film. Now, I think so. You got Dan O'Bannon with sort of the basic structure of it's a monster gets on the ship and starts killing the crew, and they have to find a way to survive. That's Dan O'Bannon. Then you get Walter Hill, who comes on board and says, it's blue collar, it's truckers in space, it's gritty, it's dirty, it's not Star Wars, it's not Star Trek, it's something grimier than that, right? That's Walter Hill, because Walter Hill's, all of his movies are like that, very very sort of dirty, right?
Yeah.
Then you bring in Ridley Scott, and what Ridley Scott brings to it is the incredible attention to detail and the atmosphere of it. Did you ever watch The Duelists?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
It is incredibly atmospheric.
Right.
There are moments. One of my favorite moments in The Duelist is a man is sitting in this big open hall, and the only light in the room is the fireplace that he's sitting in front of. And so there's this long shadow being cast through the hall from the fire flickering off the walls and off of him. It's incredibly atmospheric. I mean, that was Ridley Scott's first movie.
Mhm.
That, obviously he had directed other things, like commercials and things, but that was his first movie. And it was that atmospheric style of shooting
Mhm.
and attention to detail that Ridley Scott brought to it. So I don't think you have Alien without all three of them.
Yeah.
I think all three of them brought something to the table.
And then there's the fourth dimension to that, which is Geiger. And Dan O'Bannon brought Geiger early on, which I always thought that was Ridley Scott. But what Ridley Scott did is when he came on and he was doing during the process, the pre-production process, they're developing the script, he always feared that this will never work unless we have an alien unlike anything he's ever seen anybody's seen before, and it's absolutely terrifying.
Yep.
And there was a point where he almost gave up. He almost threw in the towel because they couldn't find that alien. And O'Banion came in with some Geiger artwork of the alien. He had it under his shirt. This is the story that I read. And he showed it to Ridley, and Ridley in that moment was like, "Oh my God, this
Yeah.
is going to be something that it's going to be a phenomenon. Nobody's ever seen anything like this." And it really clicked in that moment.
Well,
Um,
the elements that Geiger put in all of his artwork, that have become sort of the defining, one of them has become the defining element of the alien, the xenomorph creature, is that biomechanical feel. where the alien looks like a life form. It's a life form, but it moves and is shaped like a machine. And that element, and Geiger put that biomechanical feel in almost all of his artwork. That combination made it feel powerful, made it feel frightening, because it's got this machine-like efficiency to its design. Yeah, I mean, think of all the other versions of aliens getting onto ships you've seen. It's blob monsters, or it's bug monsters, or it's a big lizard. I mean, there's all those versions, and trust me, I'm a sci-fi fan. I love all of those things. I love big lizards. I love bug monsters. But the xenomorph didn't look like any of those things. It didn't look like anything from Earth. Like, you couldn't look at it and go, oh, well, that looks like it's just a lizard, or it's just a bug, or it's just whatever. It didn't look like anything. It looked like a machine made out of meat that was designed for murder. Like, every piece of it looked designed for murder. Like, its hands looked like hands that just tear you apart. Its tail was covered in spikes.
Yeah.
Its head was basically a projectile, a harpoon gun that fired harpoon teeth into your face. I mean, all of those elements.
Everything was so sharp, and the claws and tail. Did it pass the Ty test? So a lot of times when you and I would talk about horror movies, you say the movie doesn't scare you because they did things that I know I would never do. They did stupid things, and I feel like I wouldn't in that situation. Did this pass the Ty
I mean,
test?
I saw it when I was a little kid, and I was far less skeptical. But I think it holds up. When I watch it now, I'm never angry at anybody.
Yeah.
When Brett gets killed, when they're looking for the alien, they still think it's tiny. They still think it's as the size of the cat, right?
Right.
And there's no reason for them to not think that. So when they kind of split up and they're looking through the ship, if they've got those little cattle prods, they're looking for something the size of a cat. They're just going to prod it, throw it in a sack, and chuck it off the ship. Of course, that's what you would be doing, right? I mean, they're not military. They don't have like machine guns.
Right.
They're just like, let's go get rid of this thing. When it shows up, and then Parker tells everybody it was big, it was as big as a man, like, that changes the game. That's when they go and they build flamethrowers, and they're like, yeah, let's get some real weapons, right?
How did it get big so fast?
Well, they don't explain that, but at one point, Ash does say that it has adapted remarkably well to their atmosphere, considering its nutritional requirements. So clearly, he's implying that it has found things on the ship that it can eat. But they don't say what those things are.
And I was always confused about that, because going back and watching it, I always wondered, why didn't they harvest the humans on the ship for new babies, or is he eating them? Is the alien eating them?
Yeah, well, we never see the alien eat anybody. Now, in Alien 3, the one directed by Fincher, they do have a scene there of an alien eating one of the people it's killed, but I think that's the first time they ever implied that the aliens eat people. In the first movie, if you watch the version of Alien that has the extra content, like the uncut version or whatever, there are scenes in there that show that Dallas and Lambert have been sort of glued to the wall in the same way that the colonists are glued to the wall in Aliens. So there's a moment there that does imply that the alien, when it doesn't kill somebody, it does take them somewhere and glue them to the wall to await impregnation. Like, it's behaving the way we see the aliens behave in the second movie. But they cut those things out, and I think they were smart to do that. I think you watch. I've seen both versions multiple times, and the theatrical version, for all that it is a slow moving movie and it's very long, it's a fucking razor blade of a narrative. There is no fat on it to tell the story that it's telling. It just cuts right through. You add those extra scenes in, and it just feels like extra stuff. It just feels like it slows the forward motion down. I understand why they cut it. I think they were right to cut those scenes, but they do give some context for what the alien was doing.
But what I love, going back and rewatching is preconceived ideas of what I always thought. I always in one thing that I was having trouble understanding is, are the face huggers different beings? And then
No, they're just they're a sort of like how an insect will lay an egg, and out of that egg will come a caterpillar, and then that caterpillar will eat a bunch of leaves, and then it will spin a cocoon for itself, and that cocoon burst open and a butterfly will come out. They're just different stages of the same life form. So the queen, this is all stuff you learn watching the second movie, of course, but the queen lays eggs. Those eggs find a host life to implant themselves in. The implanted egg grows inside of that life form and then bursts out in the sort of worker version. I always, the alien in the first movie and the ones that are the Marines are fighting in the second movie, those are sort of the worker bees, right? The stages of the life form's pretty well defined. You know, it's queen lays eggs implant in somebody, that person dies, fully grown alien emerges. And it's actually borrowed heavily from a real life form on Earth. There is a breed of wasp that the way that it reproduces is it stings a spider, a big spider like a tarantula, which paralyzes the spider so it can't move. Then the wasp lays all of its eggs inside of the spider. Those eggs hatch, and the little larvae that have hatched eat their way out of the spider and then become wasps.
That's some cold-blooded shit, man.
Yeah, that's fucked up, man.
That's some fucked up shit.
It's basically what the aliens are doing.
Yeah. All right, so let's go back to the Expanse. So how did in terms of creating the Rossi crew, did you have the Rossi crew created in your mind, or like how did you select who you wanted to survive out of the Canterbury?
Yeah, so this is where we get super nerdy. This is the deep nerd lore. So the first version of the Expanse was actually supposed to be a video game. Many years ago. It did that. The people who asked us to develop it never bought it, so it was still mine. I took that material and I started using it to run role-playing games. But like a sci-fi version of D&D, basically. The crew that I ran for the longest through the game, that did the most things that are sort of in the book version, the characters that are on that become the core crew are characters from that game. So the reason James Holden's name is James Holden is because the guy who created James Holden named him that. So I didn't name those 4 characters.
Oh, that's fucking fascinating. Yeah. Because the first role-playing game I played was with you and Clint. And
yes.
we were over at Clint's. And what I realized is like this is a writer's room. It's a writer's room. This is a brainstorming session. What a phenomenal way to create a story, create a world, create an atmosphere. Yep. And so you had this idea and you were flushing it out, but then you had all your smart writer friends come over and play the game, you know, and it's just triggering ideas and influencing and certain things for you to create. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And so I, if you look at the acknowledgments in all of the books, the people who are first acknowledged in the books are the people that I gamed with in that first game. So like you read the acknowledgments, like thanks to Mike and Saki Mike and non-Saki Mike and Raja, and you know, and it'll go through a list of names. Those are all people that were part of that game. Now, not everyone's character made it into the book, and events of the game got changed quite dramatically when we wrote it as a book, because not everything in a game works as a book, and you know, vice versa. Yeah. So we changed quite a lot, but as a way to honor those people who had helped me so much early on developing it, I kept the names of their characters to honor them. So my friend Mike played the Amos Burton character. My friend Tom played the James Holden character. My friend Porter played the Naomi Nagata character. So those are, you know, that's why those people have those names. And the reason Shed dies in episode 4 is because the guy who was playing Shed decided he had to drop out of the game. He contacted me privately and said, "Oh, I can't keep doing the game. Is that okay?" And I said, "Okay, I'll write you out of the game." So I had a shocking moment in the game where they were playing, and suddenly this guy who'd been playing with them for however long, just suddenly his character was just dead. His head had been blown off. And it was such a great moment in the game. Like everybody was so shocked, like, "Oh my God, is Shed dead? Like his head has been cut off." We had to put that in the books. And of course, because it was in the book, we had to put it in the TV show.
I mean, you know, that makes me love the story that much more. This kind of history and the things that that created around it. So what about the distress? Was the distress call, were you influenced by Alien that they went to?
Of
Yeah.
course I was. How could I not be? I mean, now, to be fair, the distress call in space is a trope that shows up over and over and over in sci-fi. There's a million sci-fi things that we're traveling through space, we get a distress call, something terrible happens.
Uh-huh.
Uh, it's Alien did not invent that,
Right.
but Alien was so formative to me when I watched it. I'm sure that that's what was in my head when I was creating the game and then later the books is that moment of we got a distress call. And I mean, even in the books and the show, the same kind of argument happens where you've got, we have to stop for this distress call, and other people in the crew are like, no, fuck that. Why would I do that? That gains me nothing. Like, that just feels like a giant waste of my time.
I know what side of the fence you would be on, Ty, when it came to answering this Chris call. You'd be like, hell no, we're headed back to Earth.
Well, I mean, if they got themselves stuck in space, that's kind of their fault, right?
Just like I'm a sucker for opening scrolls, I'm a sucker for distress calls. Because to me, distress calls, there's so much mystery in why are these people out in the middle of space? They mentioned the Expanse, like that's why are they way out there? What are they doing out there? And then also what happened to them, and can you hear their voices, and what can and I go back to Event Horizon when they
Yeah.
when they finally got to hear that distress call. That's yeah.
It's the ghost ship. The ghost ship narrative has existed for hundreds of years, and the modern day spaceship distress call is the new version of that. I mean, you look at even recent movies on the seas, like a Deep Rising. I don't know if you ever saw Deep Rising. Deep Rising starts with there's an ocean liner and they pull up and nobody's on it. Where did they all go? The Jamie Lee Curtis movie from the 90s, Virus, where they find the Russian ship and nobody's on it. Where did they go? I mean, I think the spaceship distress call is our future sci-fi version of that story. It's the ghost ship, right? Where did
Mhm.
everybody go? What happened to them? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And there's a reason why everybody uses it. It's incredibly evocative.
And then you go on, and then you're learning the story
Yeah.
through the environment that's on there. It's like, oh, there's blood on the wall, and then this was, yeah, it's fascinating.
All right. Well, so our producer is telling us we've gone a little long, so we're going to start wrapping this up. But we have way more Alien Expanse episode 1 stuff to talk about. So instead of just doing one episode about this, we're going to do 2 episodes about this. We're going to come back. We're going to do another episode. We're going to get into an even deeper dive on the stuff from Alien that influenced us, where it came from. We're going to we have a special guest lined up. We're hoping we'll be able to join us for that second one. And we're allowed to do this because it's our fucking podcast and we can do whatever we want.
You goddamn right. Because we were just talking about that. It's time to wrap up, and I said, Ty, I am not nowhere done talking about Alien, and there's so many things that we want to kind of go in and talk about. So we're gonna do a part 2 to this one.
Yep.
And we will be back, and we will wrap this up, and then we won't take this long on all the movies and TV shows we talk about, but this one is important.
All right. Hey, thanks for joining us, guys. It was a good time. Good to see you, Wes.
Yeah, good to see you, Ty. Thank you for joining us. This is our first one. We need your support, need your help. Please like and subscribe. Do all the things that our producer tells us to tell you to do. And thanks for tuning in. And thanks for hanging out with us.